30 seconds. You two want to go in standard?
Welcome to the link online. And you're seeing some images of Canada, Montreal, Toronto. We welcome to the link. We're pleased to bring you news from Canada live on Facebook here on Fridays at 14:15 hours GMT or 10:15 a.m. in Eastern Canada. We're also heard on World Radio Paris on the shortwave service from Germany and Kauri 97.5 FM in Nigeria. Hello, I'm Levon Sevunt and I'm your host today. And with me today, Marie-Claude Simard.
Hi, everybody.
And Terry Hake.
Hi, Levon.
And we've brought in some reinforcements from our French language section. Our colleague Stéphane Parent has very graciously agreed to help us here. Stéphane, thank you very much and welcome to the link.
Well,
Is this your first time?
Yes, the first time I'm allowed into the big leagues.
All right, all right. And our technicians today are Marc-André Deschamps and Benoît Durand, and also in the control room with us is Pierre Dutil, who's keeping everything going. Hello to our listeners in Nigeria and all the listeners in Germany, France, and around the world, and of course on shortwave radio. Coming up in this half hour, the leaders of the world's 7 largest economies are gathering in France today for the G7 Leaders Summit. And in a minute, we'll talk to a Canadian expert who's at the summit about what to expect this time. Terry, what do you have for us?
I'll bring you a story about peaceful protests leading to decency.
All right. Mm-hmm. And Stéphane, you have something about the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh?
That's right. It's his first election, and there are some big worries within the party itself that this may be the very last election. There's lots of warning signs coming in, and if he doesn't perform well, his party doesn't perform well, that could help the Liberals get a second mandate. It could also propel the Green Party into third-party status.
Okay. Right.
So that's,
wow, interesting.
Something to watch.
And of course, we'll pay tribute to our beloved colleague, Carmel Kilkenny. Marie-Claude, you have been going through some of our archives and
Yes.
looking at some of the tapes.
Yeah, and our latest long format, which was about senior society, and also the last shows that she hosted.
We'll have that coming up on the show. Of course, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is on his way to this hour to Biarritz, France, for the G7 summit. And it will be the last big gathering of world leaders before this fall's federal election here in Canada. And it's an opportunity for the Prime Minister to shine. But the meeting will be anything but predictable because, well, U.S. President Donald Trump is at the table. And to find out more about what to expect from this summit, we're joined by John Curtin. He's director of the G7 and G20 research groups at the University of Toronto, and we reached him via Skype in Biarritz. Professor Curtin, welcome to Radio Canada International, and thank you for taking our call.
Well, great to be with you from near the beaches of Biarritz, where the summit is just about to begin.
Well, set the stage for us, please. There are some veterans at this summit, but also some new faces.
That's right. And the one new face amongst the G7 leaders themselves is the big potential disruptor, the unknown Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, coming into power just a few weeks ago with no electoral mandate at all from the British people. And he seems bound and determined to be a single-issue candidate focused on one issue, having Britain bounce out of the European Union, breaking up the European Union as it now exists. And who knows, potentially breaking up the United Kingdom itself. On the Irish front, Scotland. So, really big stakes. So, will Boris Johnson put aside the single minded passion of Brexit, or will he show that global Britain, which he proclaims, is more than a slogan by trying to add value to the G7, lead the G7 on some of the core issues facing the world, where the United Kingdom, under Theresa May, has actually been in the lead. I think that's the big uncertainty.
Tell me about some of the big global issues that are going to be discussed or dominate this G7 summit.
Well, clearly the biggest one, which the world needs overwhelmingly, is climate change, controlling climate change. Certainly, the Canadian people going into their election federally on October the 21st, the polls show, say, climate change is the big top of the mind subject, along with health. The polls in Germany are showing a similar centrality for climate change, and with the massive historically high heat waves throughout Europe, in France, forest fires in Siberia, Alaska, the smoke from Siberia harming the health of the Canadians in Vancouver, Americans all down the West Coast. People get it. And of course, Mr. Macron, the host, has just said that the forest fires in the Amazon are going to be the number one issue he wants to raise. Climate change and the environment was always part of his built in agenda, which he announced way last September 28th, at the United Nations General Assembly. But it was in the second tier: climate change, a just transition, biodiversity, oceans. Now I think the forest fires in Brazil have had it soared to first place. So that will be, I think, a defining test of whether these G7 leaders can get their act together. But there's a much broader agenda, about 15 priorities he set out since last September, and then two more that have just popped up on the list: uh, growth in the global economy, which is fading fast, and the potential financial crisis out of Argentina. And then key issues on peace and security, open democracy, human rights, protests in the streets of Moscow, and with up to 1.7 million people marching on the streets of Hong Kong. So, a lot more for this G7 to do than Macron had in his game plan. These leaders will really have their work cut out for them.
Talk a bit about the dynamics between these leaders. I mean, we have two big disruptors, Boris Johnson and President Trump. How do you see this summit playing out with, these two disruptors trying to make their mark?
Well, let's start with the unifying core. And at the center, you really do have the transatlantic, francophone, progressive, open twins with some star appeal still. That's Justin Trudeau, who, of course, hosted last year at the G7 summit in Charlevoix, Quebec, quite successful summit, and Macron in France. By their side, they have Angela Merkel. She doesn't have quite the political clout she did at Charleroi, having announced that she'll be stepping down as German Chancellor in a few years. So you've got a solid three. After that, if Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom does focus on the leadership the United Kingdom has shown on climate change, on the war against modern slavery, labor standards, crime, corruption, human trafficking, and a few other things where Britain genuinely has the lead. The Islamic terrorists in Iraq and Syria. The Revolutionary Guard in Iran should not seize oil tankers in the Straits of Hormuz. You could have unity coming from the northern flank of Europe. So the big uncertainties then drop down to Donald Trump and whoever the Italians will send as the prime minister. On Donald Trump, this will be his fifth or sixth G7 or G20 summit. And what we know from the record is that these summits bring out the best in Donald Trump. He actually behaves much better when he's with his fellow Democratic leaders that matter than he is when he's at home alone in the White House watching Fox News with his Twitter in hand. And there's much that he agrees with that the G7 leaders do and could. So I'm less worried about him than I am about Boris Johnson. And even the Italians, they tend to specialize in unstable coalition government. But if for some reason they end up sending a prime minister who's basically controlled back home by the Northern League at a moment when we have some reason to believe that that party is has its paymasters in Mr. Putin's Kremlin, that could provide disunity on issues where Russia is concerned. Certainly Ukraine, certainly protests on the streets of Moscow, arms control writ large, and even on the northern front in the Balkans. So a bit of an unpredictability there. We do know that Donald Trump has a wide array of friendships that come and go given the mood of his moment. So he and Justin Trudeau are now on quite good terms, and both of them need the U.S. Congress to actually ratify the new Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. Donald Trump is a champion of free and open trade on the North American front and progressive free trade, thanks to Justin Trudeau, provisions on the environment, on labor, on gender equality, on protections for Indigenous people. And France will go along with that, Germany. So that's a big unified win there, it looks like. So much to see how they could actually make meaningful advances across a broad range of France's built-in priorities. And everybody has a stake in sending a message backed by concrete measures to stop the plummeting economic growth we're facing now, to show that coordinated macroeconomic policy, a stimulus, will be coming and will work. So there's potential for actually impressive unity, and I think they'll set their little personal disputes to one side and get on with the really big job, if only because Donald Trump needs it to get reelected, and he knows it.
Well, thank you very much. We'll end on this slightly optimistic note. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and I hope to speak with you again at the end of this summit to see what actually happened.
I look forward to it, and we'll see if the leaders prove me right.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And that was Professor John Curtin. He is the director of the G7, G20 Research Institutes at the University of Toronto. And he joined us live from the Media Center in Biarritz, where he is attending the G7 summit. So it would be interesting to watch and see how these leaders perform.
Well, he told us we have to worry about everybody, the French, the Italians.
Speaking about leaders we have to worry about, the New Democratic Party is in for a fight of its life.
Well, it seems like that. We all remember that in the past two elections, they did fairly well, especially the one that was in 2011, if I remember correctly.
The Orange Wave.
Oh yes, in Quebec it was very strong, and that made the party come back, and that was what Jack Layton. Then he died, and that was a great leader, and everybody who even didn't vote for the guy felt really bad. Yeah, and that's the story with NDP leaders in the past history. Broadbent. There's been a slew of them that have been very popular. Their policies are very popular, but nobody would vote for them. Until 2011, and in 2015 it got kind of muddled a bit, but still they hold on to 44 MP positions. Seats, thank you. And now the situation is that the NDP is facing competition from the basic liberals, who are kind of center to the left a bit there, because they're trying to eat up. The liberals are scared of the Green Party, because you've heard it.
Yes.
Environment is the first concern of electors in Canada right now. And the NDP, the problem is their policy, even though they've been real loved, they haven't evolved at all in the last 4 years. And especially under this leader, there's not been much been said that's new. And it's the Green Party who's really saying new stuff, who's looking very attractive. It's never happened in Canada that the Greens even have a chance. But they've had a by-election in February. They won it. Jamit Singh was elected in February. Good for him, because there were but testimony anonymously. 9 MPs from his party spoke to CBC, said if he doesn't get elected, it's go bye-bye.
In the by-election.
By-election, yeah. So now the situation is this. Just this week, a guy named Pierre Nantel, many people don't know who he is, but he's just put maybe a match to the bomb or something. He was an MP from the NDP, and he decided, well, I'm going to go with the Green Party all of a sudden. And he was the porte-parole of the NDP. And him and the leader, Jamit Singh, weren't getting along very much, because Mr. Nantel has said in 2017, when Jamit was running to be the boss of his party, well, I think Quebecers are not going to really appreciate, the word was ostentable religious symbol.
Yeah, we have to, maybe we have a video a bit of Mr. Jagmeet Singh kind of showing his childhood, and we have to tell to our listeners who are listening to us on the radio and can't see this, that Mr. Singh is practicing Sikh. So he wears turbans, and he has a colorful collection of different turbans for various occasions.
If you go in Toronto, almost 1% out of 2 is wearing something different from...
Really?
Yes. If you go there, it's really... You go to the airport, you can see it. You go in the streets, you can see it. If you go elsewhere, in Montreal, you still see a lot of diversity. But outside of that, outside of Calgary, or even Vancouver, outside of the big 4 cities, it's a different story. And Canadians may not be at ease with this, and not only Quebecers, but the rest of Canadians. Anyway, that rests to be seen. What's really interesting about this man is if you meet him one-on-one, everybody says that, his way of communicating to you, his approach is very simple, very human, very direct. You feel implicated, and he is not coming across yet. For that, you need money. And the campaign to get money is a little bit behind all the other parties, obviously, but now they're really talking about organizational problems. In the Maritimes, for example, as of Wednesday, they had no candidates in 2 of the province and a few in New Brunswick. So are they really still a national party, is the question we're starting to ask.
Wow. How much of, you mentioned this with Nantel bringing up the issue. Here in Quebec, we've had this debate over religious signs. They have passed this legislation that prohibits people in public positions, employees, state employees, from wearing visible signs. So judges, police officers, teachers are not allowed to wear turbans, keep us any large crosses or anything. How much of that is playing into this slide that the NDP has been experiencing in Quebec, according to several polls?
I don't know. The only thing I know is that we had this debate, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, with Pauline Marois as Premier of Quebec. And you could see there was a lot of opposition to what she was trying to do. And 4 years later, the new government of l'Action démocratique du Québec came to power.
La coalition,
La Coalition Avenir Québec.
Merci beaucoup. And they passed this without too much cries. I mean, the Anglophone complained, a few groups complained, but there was no...
there is widespread support for it.
That's right. So to lead to your question, it seems like we're on, what would they say, this sable mouvant, quicksand.
Yeah.
And we don't know where it's going to go, but surely in the debates on TV, questions are going to be asked, and where it's going to go is going to start to give us an idea of how people are feeling about certain things. It might get ugly. I don't think it will, personally. I think there's other things that are really important to Canadians, all the electorates. It's a question of environment. And on this, the Liberals are a little weak because they've had lots of big talks. They did big policy announcements. But just as, the last 24 hours, we learned that we're behind our national objectives of reducing gas emission,
CO2 gas emissions.
Exactly. So there's been a lot of talk. Good for the Liberals, however. The Conservative have come late to the game, and a lot of people said, well, are they really interested? They've made a few propositions lately. They're trying to catch up. That's part of the game, but there's 60 days before the election.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's a really interesting topic, and we'll see. I mean, the election is starting maybe as soon as after
5 weeks you got, right?
After Labor Day. So we'll see what happens. And on October 21st, we'll know the results. Terry?
Yes, Levon?
Story this week about the restoration of a program that the Conservative government had abandoned nearly a decade ago. Canadian prison farms.
Yeah, 10 years ago, there were 6 prison farms used to help rehabilitate people that go to jail. And instead of just putting people in jail, throwing the key away, you had 6 different areas across the country that gave people, inmates, a chance to relate on a farm. And I don't know if any of you guys know anybody that grew up on a farm. You live on a farm, I think.
Yeah. But I'm not an inmate.
But, no, I know. But well, that's a matter of okay. But anybody that I've ever met that grew up on a farm really has a sense of themselves. And the other thing is you can't go bad hanging out with animals. Okay. So anyway, make a long story short, which I will try to do. They closed it down, but people in Kingston, which is an interesting town because it's a university town, it's a military town, and it's a prison town. And I believe it was the first capital of Canada, if I'm not mistaken, just down at the head of Lake Ontario. People there knew people that worked in the prisons. They knew the importance of rehabilitation. So a bunch of them got out every single Monday night with signs, put pressure on saying, bring back the prison farms, and they staged demos every Monday night. Last year, the Liberal government gave them the dough. Last week, they opened it up. They reopened 2 prison farms in Kingston, and I spoke to the MP from the area, Mark Gerritston, to ask him about that.
So last Thursday was a very significant event. In particular for a number of members in our community who have so passionately advocated for the reopening of the prison farms in the Kingston area. We officially celebrated that moment of declaring the prison farms open. There's some cattle on both sites. There's various different activities going on in order to ramp the programs up. And it was an opportunity for the public to come and see that, and that's what we celebrated on Thursday.
This is a big deal in the sense that in my introduction, you haven't seen the introduction, obviously, but this is a victory for decency. It really is.
It really is. I mean, right from the beginning, this issue resonated very well throughout our community. Many people, even those that weren't very actively involved in, advocating for the program, would just kind of say, why aren't they doing that? It's just, it doesn't make sense that they would cancel such an important program. And so it is. And it's also a victory for, the philosophy of, we have a role in corrections, which is to rehabilitate and reintegrate people into society. You can take the approach that the former government did of lock them up and throw away the key, but quite frankly, our approach is different, and we believe that people, the vast majority of people that end up in prison, are going to be out there again one day. So let's give them the skills they need so that when they get out there, they can be successful.
It's also a lesson in the benefits of peaceful political protest. No, I mean, they were unrelenting, these people that kept fighting for this.
Absolutely unrelenting. Every Monday night for 9 years, they stood out front, a group of them, and the members of the group would change every Monday night, but there was always about 7 or 8 people out there standing with their homemade signs and banners, and bringing about attention. In the dead of the winter, you'd drive down Bath Road where Collins Bay Institution is located, and there they were standing 1 hour every Monday night to continue this protest, and they did that for 9 years. One of the things that I always say about this particular victory is it is a real demonstration that if you truly, passionately believe in something and you fight for it and you never give up and you're relentless, you can see your way through to victory like this, which is exactly what they did. This entire victory would not have been possible without the members in our community that were so incredibly passionate about this. I had the honor to bring their voice in a certain capacity to Ottawa, but at the end of the day, without their work, none of this would have happened.
Part of my conversation with Liberal MP Mark Gerritsen down in Kingston, Ontario, it's a thoroughly great Canadian story, low-key, getting things done.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I know it's not your cup of tea, but because you come from you're a realpolitik guy, but there's something to be said for gentle protest.
Well, and rehabilitation, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. You can't go wrong hanging out with animals.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Maybe we should hold the next G7 summit in a prison.
What a cynic.
What?
Nobody asked you to be a cynic.
Some of them will already feel like that. I just wanted to bring you guys back to something that, the reason that I'm sitting in this chair today is that the person who would usually do this job when Mark Montgomery was away, our beloved colleague, Carmel Kilkenny, has passed away. And it came as a huge shock for me. I knew Carmel since 2006, and we had worked together very closely. And Marie-Claude, you looked through some of our archives, and your own work with Carmel.
Yeah, Carmel was a wonderful woman, and I'm happy to talk about her to our listeners today because she was really marvelous. And I think that's the strength of our team, is that the individuals are so wonderful and we love each other. So it's really tough when one of us goes like that. And so, yes, I worked with her on her long format, which was, you can find it in our long format. It's Canada, a Senior Society, and you can hear her beautiful voice in the several interviews that she does in there. And now we're going to end the show with the last show that she hosted when Mark wasn't there.
Yeah.
We love you, Carmel.
How about you? Do you remember your first interaction with?
You know what? I'm sure it was like 10 years ago or something like that. She came into our lives very discreetly because she had this very simple quality to her.
There she is. Yeah. That's her hosting or finishing, actually, the last show she hosted on the link. Let's listen to her a bit. And I'm saying goodbye to our listeners, and I'll let Carmel Kilkenny say the goodbyes for one last time at the link.
We're gonna see lots of friends this weekend. I have things planned for Saturday and Sunday.
And you? No plans yet, but I'm looking forward to looking out the window. Tomorrow's going to be drizzly and awful.
Oh, don't forget the clock goes back.
Sunday will be going.
Get an extra hour of sleep.
Don't forget to change your time, people from Canada here, or from Quebec anyway.
We'll be fresh and lively next week. Thank you for joining us, and we hope Mark Montgomery's having a great weekend. See you all next week. Bye-bye.